Speeches, starting with Father Bride. That's what we'll do, is it? Right. These days, whenever I give a speech at the beginning of something, I have to give a health and safety announcement about what happens in the case of fire. Now, in the context here, I think in the case of fire, you can go through any of the bits of wood that are still there because the canvas would have disappeared. It's an absolute delight to be here. It is wonderful to see everybody here and to be in the forest. There is something absolutely magical, isn't there, about forests, even the children there. I don't know if you noticed, but I saw Hansel and Gretel wandering over there, and actually in the next field there's a cast of Midsummer Night's Dream just about ready to get going. So it's going to be a wonderful evening. Now, how on earth do you approach giving a speech for such an important day? Well, you have to try and think about what you have in common with your daughter. And obviously there are certain sort of DNA type things which we'll come up to later. But one of the great things that we have in common is we both love the series The West Wing. And there's a wonderful episode of The West Wing where the president is in a foreign country, and everywhere he goes, people look at him with a sort of slightly sympathetic, slightly sad expression and say, Abu El Nabar. And they keep saying that, and he doesn't know what it means until right at the end, and it says, a man with daughters. And, this is a really rather sad thing. Well, I have to say, with the greatest respect to Tim, wherever he is, I don't believe that. It is a wonderful thing to have daughters. And having offended Tim, I'm now going to offend Becky by saying there's something really splendid about having a firstborn daughter. Now, you can get your own back later. There's something very splendid and terrifying the first time you take a child home and you think, where's the instruction manual? What am I supposed to do? And I actually had the great honour, privilege and fear of looking after Kate for the first year as a full-time house husband, and I have very many happy memories of the sorts of things we did there, the mistakes I made. Fortunately, Kate probably doesn't remember most of those things, but I do. Somehow she's turned out okay. And we did, it was wonderful to share Kate growing up. And one of the things that we did a lot of was musical things. And it was a very poignant when we had the register of this wedding, that the music that we came into was the Berceuse from the Dolly Suite by Fauré, which was a piece we used to play very much as a piano duet. So that was a very, very touching moment for me. Kay and I used to do a lot of musical things together. We used to listen to music on a very regular basis. I've still got the notebook in which we recorded diligently each night what pieces we'd been listening to. The scientist in her, the logician, was there already, and it was a great joy when Kate also was old enough to come with me to concerts. She used to sit in the audience, following the score, helping to put my stand up, all of those sorts of things, and to have them to share that great joy was something that I will never forget. Eventually, she was occasionally able to play in the orchestra. I told my friends in the orchestra this week that this was happening, and they sent her very warm best wishes to Kate. But not only did Kate take part in musical activities, she actually wrote music from a very early age. And I thought you might like to hear a little piece.
Oh, God.
That
I would. Yes.
So if I snap my fingers through magic, Isn't that wonderful? What is more, she was blessed with 20/20 vision among any other things, because that piece is called "In the Evening I Am So Happy." Isn't that wonderful? And I have the original manuscript with me, which I will show you later. We didn't just share music, we tried to share all sorts of things. Now, it may come as no surprise that we didn't share much in terms of the practical side of life, wiring plugs, all sorts of things, but very fortunately her mother was wonderful at all of those practical things, as the cake demonstrates beyond all doubt. And I have very many happy memories of them watching and baking and painting and all of those sorts of things. So I couldn't ever help in that, so I suppose that what I looked for was trying to develop imagination, interest in the world outside. So I remember taking Kate at an early stage to vote, just as my father had taken me to vote, and watching election programmes in the evening. Also, we used to have great fun round the table talking about intellectual logical problems. The nature of prime numbers and the extent to which there is an infinite number of primes. The significance of white ravens in logic. And the one that I particularly liked, was the hare and the tortoise. And if the tortoise had a lead over the hare at the beginning of the race, then it was logically impossible for the hare ever to catch up with the tortoise. That one still bothers me. But it was a laugh a minute round the dining table. But we had great fun. But of course, you like to think that you're keeping up with your children, but I was overtaken very, very quickly. I remember putting Becky to bed one night. They had bunk beds at the time, and I suppose Becky must have been about 3, so that would have made Kate about 7. And this little voice came up and said, "Daddy, do circles tessellate?" And of course, believing in empirical deduction, I said, "Well, work it out for yourself." I'm not going to make life easy for you. But no, they were very happy days. And of course, you know, she left me way behind in her academic career. But I like to think I left a little bit of influence there, because one of my memories is the day that I took my PhD thesis to be bound at the university library. It was actually in the bottom of the pushchair as I was taking Kate up the hill to the university library. So it must have been through osmosis that came through there. But anyhow, it's just been wonderful to see how Kate's phenomenal intellectual development. I try to keep up. I'm very interested, but I don't really understand what it is she does. And I get very confused with the difference between a molecule and a cell and an atom. And she's done a wonderful job for me in actually explaining this to me. She's actually written out in layman's terms, such a musician like me can understand some of this stuff. And it shows the phenomenal way in which her ability to teach and communicate comes through. And that is, I think, a huge joy to me to see that. So it's just wonderful, despite whatever everybody says, to be a father of daughters. Now, of course, today's not just about Kate, it's about Pete as well. Now, you only have to meet Pete, and in 5 minutes' time, you know that there's somebody there of the highest moral integrity and personal authority, and just a thoroughly decent man. And that's really wonderful. But that may sound as if he's just slightly pious or pompous, and that's not the case at all. Not the case at all. He's a wonderfully warm, happy man, and it thrills me to see the two of them together. I should also add that he's a dab hand with an electric drill, as the saucepan racks in my flat demonstrate. So fathers are supposed to say, "No man is ever good enough for my daughter." Well, there may be some fathers that think that. I don't. I think he's wonderful, and it's a real joy to have him. I think formally one is supposed to welcome him into the family. But that makes me seem like a Victorian patriarch, and I'm certainly not that. So I'm not going to do that. And besides, he already is, in my view, part of the family. And all I can say is it's just wonderful to see the two of them together. There's only one problem, which is wedding presents. Now, Kate is wonderful at many things, but actually making decisions is not one of them. So when you ask her, what would she like for tea, or what would she like for Christmas, or where would she like to go, you never get a response other than, well, I don't know. And of course the same as wedding presents. So what do the wedding presents go? Well, I don't know. So I know what you wouldn't like. You know, the John Lewis toast rack would not go down very well. So I've scratched my head to decide what the appropriate wedding present actually should be. And I was stumped until Wednesday evening when I discovered that Mark was going to be here. And I thought, well, I couldn't miss the opportunity to have a wonderful cellist here. So on the train coming back from London on Thursday, I wrote them a tiny little piece as a wedding present, which I hope by the magic is now going to be played. Thank you, wherever you are. I suppose I should follow that by saying, now I'll open the curtains and we'll have the second act of Aida. But if you were taking notes earlier, you will remember that there's a touring players with Midsummer Night's Dream there, and I popped in across to have a word with Oberon to see if there was any got good lines that I could have to finish the speech off. And he came up with three. The first one was, I'd rather have a handful or two of dried peas, which I don't think is probably appropriate after the wonderful meal that we've had. The second one I rather like, which is this: be advised, fair maid, to you your father should be as a god. But in conclusion, I think I will use the third quote and ask you to join me in a toast to celebrate the bride and groom. Here come the lovers, full of joy and mirth. Joy, gentle friends, joy and fresh days of love accompany your hearts. The bride and groom.
Bride and groom.
Thank you.
Lovely. Give me a hug.